Hello, everyone. So today we are going to get in more of the processes of the Cold War and just kind of see how it all shook out, get into some specifics of like what either side was trying to do, kind of set this whole thing up. Okay, so again, the whole idea of the Cold War is that this is a period of rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Okay, it's cold because no one actually ever attacks each other, because if we use things like nuclear weapons, we would all die and that would suck. And really, what we're looking at is it kind of all starts in Europe, if you will. So what you have here is a base of NATO states, what I'll get into, Warsaw Pact. So the blue is pro-West, the East is pro-Soviet, if you will. You've got some people that are not quite aligned, at least early on. And then you have Yugoslavia and Albania, who were leaning communist, but weren't necessarily satellites of the Soviet Union. So that should give you kind of like an idea. So when it came to economic policy, this is what you've got going on. So the U.S. is in this capitalism zone, okay? The whole idea is private businesses really running the show, making the determinations that they want for their companies to best benefit the overall economy. Relatively low government involvement in private business. Lots of consumerism. We want lots of things for you to buy, lots of products that are available. Again, with capitalism, it is the consumer who is really determining the market and what is going to be made. And lots of economic freedom. You can buy what you want. You can go wherever you want. As far as your money, you make that decision. The Soviets, on the other hand, are, of course, a communist nation where the entire economic system is centrally run and centrally controlled by the federal government. They decide what the people, quote unquote, need, and that is the only thing that gets produced. Okay, there are limited consumer goods here, which unfortunately will open the way for organized crime and stuff like that to get in, because people still want the jeans. I don't know why it's the jeans. Everybody loves jeans. I mean, I like jeans. But I only have like 2 pairs of jeans. Some people have 50, but hey, what can you do? And then the other thing they're really going to push on is all about equality, which is legit in the theme behind communism, and loyalty to the state. And that's going to be kind of like either side of that zone, if you will. Then you have governmental philosophy. So on the USA, Western Europe side, we do have the democracy here. This is in which the idea of free elections, you're running the democratic process, people get to determine candidates and primaries and all of those types of things. And lots of freedoms like freedom of the speech, press, the standard things that are in, the United States Bill of Rights and stuff like that. This is not a U.S. history class, but you should know it. And if you don't, go look them up. It's important you know your rights. Whereas the Soviets in the Eastern Bloc is a little bit more of authoritarianism. This is the state decides what is going to happen. There are elections. I have them in quote, but typically there's only one party. So, that really doesn't allow much. A lot of times it is run by an oligarchy. So you have a committee of people that, yes, there might be a legislature, but really it's a committee of people that sometimes has an individual that's at the head of it too, who are making these decisions fairly unilaterally. And we're looking at limited to no freedoms. You're not speaking out against the press. The press is not speaking out against the government because the government owns the press. Individual people don't really have that opportunity. You can't, again, go back to the economic thing, just buy whatever you want because it's not there. It's a much more controlled system. Now, what are their similarities? Well, they criticize each other a whole lot. We being the West and the United States, go after the Soviets for oppression, lack of rights, and lack of economic freedoms. The Soviets come back at us with massive discrimination, particularly in the realms of racism and discrimination against women, having large poor populations or large sectors of the populations that fall through the cracks, relatively unorganized or inefficient. Both sides have a stupidly huge military, as you can see there by the atomic bomb test on your right, because they both have atomic weaponry. So you're looking at huge militaries, would often rely on both sides would rely on military power and then fear of one another. In the U.S., we need to fear the Soviets because they are a threat. And the Soviets, it's the same thing, which of course doesn't really make for any type of saneness, if you will, here. It's just this amped up rhetoric. And the rest of the world, you need to pick a side. Although I will talk about some who don't. But that's the whole idea, that these nations are actually, a little bit more similar than you think sometimes. Now, in generally, what were the Soviets doing? Okay, well, they again established things like there are only one political party in the area that they control, that is communism. They will always use these 5-year plans to adopt industry using collective agriculture, which typically fails and results in famines and deaths. No consumer goods, that they feel that are not necessary. So it's pretty bland in that. You see there on the right, though, it's supposed to be all about the workers. That's a propaganda poster by Stalin up there in the corner. And you see it's a series of just like these positive worker experiences, how everybody has jobs and everybody's equal. It's all going to be great. It's not really the case, but hey, that's what they want. And they're also going to really embrace Lenin's proclamation. If you remember when we talked about Lenin's takeover of Russia and forming into the Soviet Union, the idea was to actively spread communism around the world, and that was exactly what they were going to do. The U.S., on the other hand, is going to basically try to stop it. We are going to adopt the policy of containment. So this is how the idea of containment is simply this. Well, communism is in Russia. It's in Eastern Europe. Nothing we can do about that. We're not going into these countries to try to free them, as Hungary will find out in 1956. As well as when China goes communist, we're going to kind of leave it alone in China and again look to prevent its spread. And this concept was really developed by American politician Dean Acheson. The way that we're going to carry out containment is something known as the Truman Doctrine. So depending on the area, we will give military aid, financial aid, or economic plans and stuff like that to any area that is trying to prevent a communist takeover. And in the 1940s, you had communists try to take over in both Greece and Turkey. The U.S. gave military aid, not necessarily troops, but military aid, weapons and stuff like that, as well as economic aid, and we were able to prevent those things from those countries from quote unquote falling to communism. In some cases, such as in Korea or Vietnam or others, or Afghanistan, the United States will actually Afghanistan, we don't send troops, we send a lot of weapons. But in Korea and Vietnam, we're going to send people, and we're going to see a lot of wars getting fought between either side, but not directly. We'll get into that as well. And really use things like the Marshall Plan. We talked about the Marshall Plan already, and the idea of using economic benefits to get countries more willing to be kind of on our side than the Soviets. And that's going to be like super powerful and super successful. Okay, so that's kind of establishing this base. I'm going to get into some cultural things soon. I'm going to get into the wars and all that type of stuff. And hopefully this continues to kind of establish how the Cold War is going to work moving forward. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care.